Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in this second episode of the Fleet Week Commercial Fleets. My name is Steven Schroefs. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Fleet Europe, and I will be your moderator of this webinar. Today, we have Geotab with us to discuss about the connected LCV fleet. You see on the screen that the connected LCV fleet is the best possible LCV fleet you can have. Ladies and gentlemen, we all want a winning corporate strategy. And when it comes to LCV fleet management, you can't do without connectivity. A connected fleet not only enables you to deliver fuel efficiency, to deliver cost optimization, you can also supervise driver behavior and you can track your vehicles. So it is really a benefit in terms of fleet management and for sure in optimizing the total cost of ownership of your LCV fleet. In this learning webinar supported by Geotab, you will learn how to connect your fleet and what kind of advantages the connected LCV fleet has for you, your company, and your drivers. This webinar is part of the Fleet Week on commercial fleets. It's the second episode, you see it on the screen, and we will have throughout the week, each day, an engaging webinar. An engaging webinar for you in which we will highlight some of the specifics related to LCV fleet management. And we, of course, hope that you can stay with us also for the other webinar sessions that we organize during the week. The Fleet Week is supported by ALD Automotive, Fleet Logistics, Geotab, the supporting partner of today, LeasePlan, Sixt, and Webfleet Solutions, and we would like to thank them for their support and in making this Fleet Week possible. Please, ladies and gentlemen, know that this webinar and the information given is only for informative purposes only. And so if you would like to reproduce some of the content, then you need to let us know, and also Geotab. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to introduce our guest speaker. Today, my guest is Joshua Gordon. He is the EV Strategy Manager at Geotab. Geotab is the world's most known and biggest telematics and IoT provider when it comes to connecting vehicles. And so he will now do the presentation. During the presentation, you can be interactive. You can ask your questions via the chat function in the tool. And we will also have an engaging Q&A round at the end of the session, when I will try to moderate the most interesting and important questions from the audience to our guest speaker, Joshua Gordon. Joshua, welcome. Welcome to the Fleet Week. Thank you very much for the support. I hope that you are doing fine. I think that you can see me and you can hear me. It would be great if you can now share your presentation. I will now also end sharing mine. This will make it a little bit easier for both of us.
Okay. See if I can do this.
Yes.
How's that?
Perfect. We see your presentation on the screen. We can hear you loud and clear. So I am going to mute myself so that full attention is for you. And to the audience, once again, if you have a question for Joshua Gordon, you can ask your question via the chat function in this tool. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you, Fleet Europe, for having us, and also the audience for joining us today for this session. So over the next 30 minutes or so, I will speak on what connectivity is in the realm of fleet management, and how it is, one, creating more efficient internal combustion engine vehicles, but two, enabling the future of electric vehicles. Because I think it is important to understand how connectivity can simultaneously assist both internal combustion engine vehicles and EV, because ultimately, if you look at fleets over the next 5 to 10 years, they are likely to have a combination of the two. But first, I just wanted to provide a very brief overview of Geotab itself and how we are well positioned in the space of vehicle connectivity. So Geotab is a product-driven company with an engineering focus, offering fleet management solutions to businesses of various needs and sizes. So we started in the year 2000 by the Coles family. It's privately owned, and to date, we have around 2.1 million vehicles connected, which makes us the largest commercial telematic provider in the world. We have a modular, open fleet management platform with third-party marketplace solutions that can directly benefit you as a fleet operator. We have offices all over the globe, 1,200 employees and counting, headquartered in Oakville in Canada, but we also have offices all across Europe and Asia. So that makes us truly global, and it enables us to serve customers all over the world. And so to date, we serve over 44,000 individual customers, and they're all of various sizes. So from small fleets of, say, less than 10 vehicles, all the way up to enterprise customers that may have tens of thousands of vehicles. So we offer a solution that is scalable, that's suited to fleets of all sizes. And so our customers include the likes of Pepsi, Enterprise, and we are the sole telematic provider for the state of California in the US. So the platform is really built to scale with you and your business, and we have a proven track record of serving fleet customers all over the world. And so moving on to the topic of today, the topic at hand, connectivity. So the question is, what does connectivity mean to you? When you think about having a connected vehicle, what possibilities does that open up? What can I do now that I wasn't able to do before? Connectivity creates numerous opportunities for you as a fleet operator to take advantage of. For one operator, this may mean focusing on driver safety. For another, it may mean focusing on fuel management. It may be both or something completely different. But connectivity can produce tangible results, benefits, and as a result, create efficiencies for the entire fleet, which can ultimately lead to cost savings for the business. And connectivity for Geotab is telematics, which can be utilized in a growing number of ways. A decade or so ago, telematics was merely a GPS location on a map. However, today, it's so much more than that. The demands of businesses to create efficiencies is greater than ever before, and telematics is a gateway to tap into that data and create actionable insights. Here at Geotab, we split those uses of data or telematics into 6 key pillars: productivity, optimization, safety, sustainability, compliance, and expandability. Under each pillar are monitoring tools, rules, metrics, reporting that contribute towards creating efficiencies. And so the rule of thumb is that the more in which you engage with telematics, the more you are likely to benefit, optimize fleet operations, and have a positive impact on the business's bottom line. And so a fleet operator may have an idea of what they're specifically looking to manage, but over time, through learnings, experiences, may find additional use cases of telematics and connectivity. And so the question is, again, as a fleet operator, when you think about connectivity, what does it mean to you? Telematics has been used for internal combustion vehicles for decades, and many tools that have been developed for conventional vehicles also ring true with electric vehicles. However, in many ways, EVs break rank, and where the focus was previously, it now shifts. For example, fuel management. EV charging times take significantly longer than fueling up at a petrol station. Therefore, additional monitoring and managing is required when tackling electric vehicle charging. And I will go through this in further detail later in the presentation. Furthermore, EV procurement. So companies that specialize in vehicle connectivity, like Geotab, are in a unique position when we look at the procurement process of electric vehicles, as we have the ability to provide detailed insights on existing fleet usage, how long and how often a vehicle's driving, where do they dwell, and insights into running costs. This can ultimately be leveraged to plan for the future of electric vehicles. But if we look at the status of the electric vehicle market today, so Europe in its entirety is the fastest growing market anywhere in the world when we look at electrification, ahead of the likes of China and the United States. This has been driven by a number of factors, including government policy, incentive programs, more vehicle choices within the European market, and also a positive shift in economics when we look at the likes of things like total cost of ownership. And the LVC market is on a growth trajectory, somewhat driven by changes in consumer behavior, such as the growth of e-commerce and online retailers. And this is expected to increase the purchase of LVCs for facilitating this growth. However, if we look at the sale of LVCs and vans in the EU, they do remain predominantly internal combustion engine vehicles, so 96% at the end of 2020. And so we have plenty of work to do as an industry to help that shift towards the conversion to electric vehicles. And there was some research that was done late last year by ID TechX, and they showed that small electric LVCs could reach a total cost of ownership price parity in the next few years. And we're also seeing a number of corporates start to pilot e-LVCs within the market. So I'm thinking of the likes of British Gas, which ordered 1,000 e-LVCs, and the likes of Amazon that did the same, just under 2,000. And so when you look to add electric vehicles onto the fleet, there are vital questions that need to be asked. And these questions have come up through experience of working with fleets on a day-to-day basis, and are designed to enable a evidence-driven transition to electric vehicles. And I'm just going to run through some of those questions that we've come across to date. So starting with performance requirements. So based on the current duty cycle of the fleet vehicle, understanding whether there's an electric vehicle that can suit that daily driving demand without having to charge throughout operation. And also to increase the accuracy, take into account things like temperature, because we know that that can impact electric vehicle range. There are also other factors that can impact EV range that will be discussed again later on in the presentation. Vehicle selection. The availability of EV models on the market has been a barrier for a number of years, and particularly issues around lead times and deliveries. But this is improving as the months go by. You know, the OEMs are setting ambitious targets to bring electric vehicles to market, And we expect to see around 500 electric vehicles on the market by the end of 2022. And obviously some of those will reside within the LVC market. Return on investment. So, if I as a business want to make an investment into an EV fleet, when is my break-even point? What does the total cost of ownership look like? And while there are various finance options that are now available that are reducing that initial outlay, we know that the upfront outlay of electric vehicles and the infrastructure can be a burden to fleet operators. But if we look at the longer term view, you can really start to realize the potential of electric vehicles and the environmental impacts. The transition to electrification is underpinned by reducing emissions within the transportation sector. And having the ability to quantify your fleet's environmental impacts is another tool of persuasion for a fleet operator to evaluate. And so this is not an exhaustive list. Charging infrastructure is another. How do you finance it? What types of charging to deploy? And understanding how this will impact the day-to-day operations of your business. However, getting to grips with knowing what are the right questions to ask and where to find the necessary information is a crucial first step towards electrifying a fleet. And so we know that today there are some fleets that are more primed for electrification than others. And this is generally based on the way in which they operate. So the nature of field-based, depot-based logistic operations suggest that daily driving miles will be maximized and optimized, and charging will be less problematic. Logistics and field service players are typically depot-based, making charging a typically overnight and frequently fairly straightforward option. Alternatively, some of those drivers may take their vehicles home and charge overnight. The price and total cost of ownership sensitivity of the LVC market has the potential to make the sector a leader in EV adoption. However, as mentioned before, insufficient models that are available within the market means that it currently lags behind that of passenger vehicles, but that could indeed change. And so the next question is, okay, what tools do I need to enable that transition? But I'm just going to take a pause there. And Stephen, are there any questions that may have popped up so far?
I have a few questions, Joshua. Thank you very much. To the audience, if you have questions for Geotab and Joshua, you can use the chat function in the tool. Joshua, first question. At the moment, Geotab has more than 2 million vehicles connected. How many of those vehicles are LCVs?
Very good question. I don't know the direct answer to that. Typically Geotab works with a variety of vehicle segments, all the way down from passenger vehicles to heavy duty fleets of over 3.5 tons. I don't know the figure off by hand, but I can certainly get back to the person that asked that question.
Okay, you were talking in the beginning of your presentation about the fact that thanks to connectivity, you can achieve tangible results. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Can you perhaps give some kind of a percentage that you have seen in terms of cost savings, return on investment? Is there something that you can share with the audience?
Yes, sure. So I do kind of touch upon it later on in the presentation, but I can, give a brief snippet. So, one of the slides that I discussed at the beginning was, okay, how can you utilize telematics to the benefit of your fleet? So if I just was to pluck out one of those things around optimization and potentially, vehicles idling, so if you're able to monitor the times in which vehicles within your fleet are idling and for how long for, you can then start to, one, monitor it, but also manage the impacts of idling, because you know that when a vehicle is idling, it's costing a fleet operator money. So having that visibility, I think, enables a operator to make those decisions to say, okay, when a vehicle is idling, we need to make sure that it's not, and then that can ultimately save the business money. But we have seen cases where, you know, we've seen fuel costs decline by as much as 30% just by putting into you know, mitigation strategies around idling, and that's just one of the factors of many.
You also presenting the approach around connectivity at Geotab. You have 6 main pillars. Question about that. Can I, as a fleet manager, opt for the solutions in 1 or just 2 pillars, or does it always come with the 6 pillars?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess, you know, if you were to choose Geotab as your connectivity partner of choice, the way in which it works is that, you know, you have the options to use all or just some. You know, I think typically from experience, they choose to take telematics because they have a particular issue that they're looking to solve. But however, over time, they will see that there's additional things that telematics can provide that can ultimately be of benefit to the business. So to answer the question, you know, it's completely up to the customer how much in which they engage with telematics. But I think those 6 pillars just shows you the variety of ways in which you can engage with telematics.
A question that just popped in. What behaviors impact the range on EVs, and how can Geotab there help?
Yeah, good question. So again, I do touch upon that later on, but just to give you a snippet, you know, we know that there are a number of things that can impact the vehicle range. So, you know, things like battery degradation, temperatures in which they are operating, their charging habits can also impact the range of the vehicle. You know, so just to take one example, we have done some analysis around battery degradation over time, and we analyzed around 6,000 vehicles that we had and that were using Geotab technology, and we found that on average, the batteries would degrade about 2.3% every year. And then in reality, that has an impact on the vehicle range. So, you know, if you have a vehicle that has, say, 100 miles of range, every year it may lose 2 or 3 miles of range just because the batteries degrade, and that's a natural process. So that's one example, but I think to the question, there are multiple factors that can impact the range of a battery.
Yes, but let's listen to the rest of your presentation, because as mentioned by yourself already, a few questions that we asked will be developed a little bit later also during your presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, we continue with the presentation of Joshua of Geotab. If you have a question for him, don't worry, you can still ask your question via the chat, because at the end of the webinar, we will again have a Q&A round with Joshua Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thanks to everyone for posting the questions so far. And so just to continue, so when fleets are looking to transition to electric, this can't be delivered through a one-size-fits-all approach. It requires personalization and customization. And in practice, that it means that there needs to be a deep understanding of how the existing fleet of petrol and diesel vehicles are operating. So for fleets transitioning to EV at scale, it requires an accurate and data-driven recommendation tool. And at Geotab, we have over a decade of experience with electric vehicles, and our electric vehicle suitability assessment platform helps fleet operators eliminate some of the guesswork that you can find when transitioning to electric. And so the tool analyzes a fleet's data to create a recommendation based on each vehicle's distinctive driving patterns. The best fit recommendation identifies which of the vehicles are best candidates for EV replacement. And so the analysis includes things like, okay, looking at vehicle types, range capability, what are the savings from a total cost of ownership perspective, as well as quantifying the environmental benefits of the fleet. What we find is that it's rarely possible for a fleet to transition to electric straight away, based on one, range capability, or the economics. But this may change as, as mentioned before, new electric vehicles are coming to the market, and the economics of electric vehicles are starting to shift in favor of them. And telematics data is crucial in understanding the current state of the fleet and delivering a suitable EV transition plan. And transition by its very definition indicates that the switch from internal combustion to electric will take time for any fleet. Therefore, having a turnkey solution that a fleet can execute at any given time is of real benefit. And that's essentially what the electric vehicle suitability assessment provides. But diving into some of the detail. So vehicle connectivity allows for a degree of personalization. The key is developing a comprehensive picture of the current fleet to then make a recommendation. And at Geotab, we split those areas into 3. And so the first is range capability. So EVs today have in some cases range limitations. Therefore, taking a current fleet vehicle and understanding what the longest daily driving distance is for that vehicle for a certain time period, it could be anything from as little as a month all the way up to 12 months, will help when you're selecting an EV that can carry out the daily routes without having to charge. Rule of thumb, the closer you can get to the range limitations of an electric vehicle, the better the total cost will be. Because with every electric mile that you drive, you're saving in comparison to an internal combustion vehicle. And this leads to the total cost of ownership piece, or the cost savings. So EVs have higher sticker prices in comparison to ICE vehicles. Costs are declining, but they are still relatively high. Governments across Europe are helping to mitigate this through various incentive programs. However, if you look at the costs over the lifetime of the vehicle, the picture can be much different. So taking into account the total cost, and not just the cost of acquisition of the vehicle and all the infrastructure, but also fuel costs, maintenance costs, insurance, taxes. And this can lead to a favorable equation for electric vehicles, a lower total cost in comparison to the internal combustion counterpart. Therefore, it's really important to take a longer term view of ownership when you're looking to make that switch to electric. Finally, business of all forms have targets to reduce their environmental footprint, and adopting an EV is one way of achieving this. So Geotab is able to quantify the vehicle tailpipe emissions based on what your current fleet is doing, but also based on the fleet in which we recommend. So you can quantifiably see the reduction in emissions if you were to make that switch. And so circling back, adding the layer of connectivity sets the groundwork to get a personal look at your fleet, and in turn assist in making a evidence-based recommendation for electric vehicle adoption. And so moving on. So once you have EVs in the fleet, one of the biggest mistakes that we see is thinking about telematics for EVs the same way that we think about conventional vehicles or internal combustion vehicles. It's important that your telematics, your connectivity provider, is able to give you full visibility of your data, and not just say, for example, what the current state of charge is of your electric vehicle. While this is a very important metric, to really dive into the detail and get the most out of your EVs, you require much more data. You need rich data around driving and charging. How efficient are the EVs driving? What's the fuel economy compared to the internal combustion vehicles that I have within the fleet? How is my driver behavior style impacting the range of my vehicle? Are my EVs getting plugged in, and are they charging? Can my provider show me visibility of those two things? Showing the real-time state of charge while charging, and even telling the driver to charge when the state of charge of the vehicle reaches a critically low level. You also need charging reports on what is the starting and ending state of charge during that charging session. How much energy or kilowatts did I consume? And what are the costs associated with the various types of charging that my fleet carries out? Ultimately, these insights will ensure that the vehicle is driving efficiently, you're getting the most out of the vehicle range, and the vehicle is on a charging schedule that ensures that the vehicle is always ready for operation. Unlike internal combustion vehicles, where it takes seconds to fuel up, EVs require significant planning and organization when it comes to charging. Therefore, when you choose your connectivity partner, it's really important that they're able to provide all the driving and all the charging data that you require for effective operation. And so at the top of the presentation, I spoke about how telematics can have a positive impact on fleet operations. And it's important to know that internal combustion vehicles that are not eligible to switch to EV today, whether that be there's not an EV on the market with the range, or it just doesn't make economic sense, internal combustion vehicles can still be more efficient. They can still be more sustainable. And driver behavior is one of those areas of efficiency, regardless of the engine type. So at Geotab, we have a driver behavior module, and it's a way to engage, motivate, and coach drivers, provide both the drivers and the managers insights into what requires improvement, but also the drivers that deserve some recognition. And so through the module, you're able to measure driver performance based on key parameters, such as speeding, seatbelt use, harsh braking, acceleration, and cornering. And for each element, the operator has the ability to set the preferences. So for example, for harsh braking, this is when the G-force is greater than a certain value. Or for speeding, it's at X percentage over the speed limit of the road. And with this, fleets are able to monitor the number of exceptions the drivers experience for each performance metric and see those trends over time, and even create a safety score for each driver. And this can potentially build healthy competition between the drivers. And so on the right-hand side, we have a very small case study here from FarmDrop, which is a company that uses Geotab technology. And they saw a 33% reduction in instances of poor driving behavior by using this module. And as a result, they used 27% less power within their vehicles. And this resulted in, one, lower fuel consumption, but also more importantly, it reduced their fuel costs. And so the point is there is that regardless of the engine type, vehicles can be more sustainable when you have the right tools in place. And so just going full circle here, and this is the last slide of the presentation. And so at Geotab, we create that layer of connectivity through various monitoring tools and reporting that provide data-driven, actionable insights to allow for a more comprehensive understanding of fleet performance and help develop mitigation strategies to improve day-to-day operations. Through this, we can help improve the performance of the existing internal combustion fleet. We can help fleets make their way or start to transition to electric, the ability to operate those electric vehicles, and also optimize and manage vehicle charging. And so when you think about a partner for connectivity, you want to make sure that they can support you not only today, but also into the future when you start that journey of electrification. So that comes to the end of my presentation, Stephen. So I'm just going to hand it back to yourself for any additional questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joshua. Thank you for the insights. Thank you for the presentation. There are questions, of course. To the audience, if you have a question for Joshua, use the chat function. We are going to start the engaging Q&A. The first question. You were explaining about driver profiling and EV fleets. Does this mean that it's probably not wise to consider switching your entire fleet in one day to an ELCV fleet? Is that correct?
Not necessarily, right? I mean, I think in the presentation, I went through some of the key kind of questions that you need to ask as a fleet operator to make that switch. And things that I was speaking about was, okay, is there an LVC on the market today that can suit the daily driving requirements of the vehicles that are operating on the ICE fleet? But also, I guess businesses have various motivations to switch to electric. But one of the key considerations is around cost and the economics. So if it just doesn't make economic sense today because of one, there isn't a model at a certain price point, or the vehicles just don't operate in a way that makes electrification make sense, then possibly not. But on the other hand, if they're ambitious around their environmental strategy and targets, they may switch to electric anyway, regardless of the economics, right? So I guess it's on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, because this is also linked to the second question I have, and that is, isn't it better to wait with ELCVs, knowing that when the offering in 2021, 2022 will increase, that probably also the TCO will become even more attractive. So isn't it wise to wait a little bit, or do you say, or let me put it in a positive way for fleet electrification, why isn't it good to wait?
Sure. Yeah, really good question. So I think the key here is understanding the economics of electric vehicles. Well, it is the case that more and more electric vehicles are going to come to market, which increases consumer choices. Actually, in some cases, which we are seeing, based on the way in which a fleet's current ICE vehicles are operating, it makes financial sense today to start switching some of those vehicles. And through the tool that we had, the suitability assessment, it will say, for some vehicles, it might just not make sense because there isn't a vehicle on the market. It doesn't make financial sense. Therefore, we're not going to recommend it. And we're seeing, typically fleets are making a staggered approach. So they start to implement EVs where it makes sense. And then over time, as the market develops, they will then start to transition to 10, 20, 30% EV. But, I guess you could wait until there's more models because, it's probably going to weigh in your favor. But actually, if you look at the data today and analyze that data, there could be vehicles and drivers on the road today where it makes financial sense to switch to EV. Therefore, as a business, you would be saving costs from day one, right? So, I guess it depends on how you look at it.
Okay, and I think also that it can never hurry to introduce already some ELCVs, even just to test them, to pilot them, to make your employees, let's say, that they are used to driving those ELCVs.
No, and that's a really good point. It's a new technology for everyone. I said at the top, there's fleets that are piloting EVs, getting to know the technology. What kind of fuel savings am I making? What kind of maintenance savings am I making? How much is it costing for charging infrastructure? So all of these questions that fleets have, I guess they're starting to understand what the answers might be by being able to trial or pilot the technology. Because you're totally right. I think it's a learning experience for everyone at the moment in terms of EVs.
Okay. A question from Pierre Charveria around TCO. What is your vision of the duration to have a better TCO with EV rather than ICE, in terms of how many years can you hold the EV for an optimized TCO?
Yeah, good question. So I think what we're seeing is that EVs could potentially last for longer than what an internal combustion vehicle could do, based on the metrics of battery degradation that we're seeing today. So that's one point. And then I think the second point is around, okay, what factors within the TCO impact that total cost, and where are EVs more favorable than internal combustion? So one is fuel, right? So the cost of electricity per mile is much cheaper than the cost of fuel, petrol and diesel per mile. So as a fleet operator, the more in which the vehicle is driving, the more that you're potentially going to be saving in fuel. So that's one part of the equation. Then the second is around maintenance costs. So EVs are made up of a couple of dozen moving parts in comparison to a couple of thousands when you look at an internal combustion vehicle. And therefore, there's so many more points of failure when you look at an internal combustion. And we're seeing that in reality. Fleets are saving anything from 30 all the way up to 60 and 70% in terms of maintenance when they switch to EV over an ICE vehicle. So I think those are kind of the two main components within the TCO that fleets will see significant savings around electric vehicles.
Yes. And then to add perhaps what we also have seen for sure for the passenger cars, so the electric vehicles on the passenger car side, is that where a few years ago there were still some concerns about the used car values of those electric vehicles coming into the used car market because the technology is still developing. We now see that there is, in fact, a big appetite from customers for those second-hand EVs. So also there, it's not really a bad business case. So
yeah, and just to kind of add to that as well, a big part of the resale value of the EVs is around the battery, right? The battery still makes up a large proportion of the cost. And then, when you look at, moving a vehicle into the second-hand market, how is the cost of the battery over, say, 4, 5, 6, 7 years that you may have that vehicle within the fleet? And as I mentioned before, we're not seeing great levels of degradation on these batteries. So, when you're looking at, I've had the vehicle for 5 or 6 years, we've only seen a 10 to 20% rate of degradation. So there's plenty of life left in it, and therefore that's having an impact on the resale value. But obviously, I think we'll know more over time once electric vehicles start to drip into that second-hand market. But it is certainly a concern for operators to take into consideration.
And to the audience, if you would like to know more about the total cost of ownership of LCVs, then I would like to invite you for our session on Thursday, supported by Fleet Logistics, because that session is fully dedicated to the total cost of ownership question. Other questions from Ronald De Haan. First question from him is, when scoring the actual speed versus the maximum allowed speed, how does the system, your technology, deal with temporary speed reductions?
Temporary speed reductions. I'm not too sure what the question. So I think I think it might have focused around the driver behavior module. And so within the Geotab map, you can set what the road speed is on the road, and then you can also set a speed to say, this is the set speed in which the vehicle would be speeding, and then therefore you can produce exceptions reports around those two metrics, and have visibility of how many times a driver may exceed the speed limit over a certain period. And then I guess, having that visibility, you can then say to the driver, hey, we can see that you're speeding X, Y, Z locations. We need you to do something about that, because ultimately that can have an impact on fuel costs as well, right? So I hope that answers the question. I think that's what it was referring to.
Ronald, give a little bit more explanation or context to his questions. He is mentioning, for example, when a road is being maintained, etc. So that there are, for example, unexpected road conditions that oblige you to slow down, or where the maximum speed has been adapted from the authorities,
Oh, right. Okay. So there is functionality to set the road speed at a certain time, and therefore that will take into account any reporting that you do. So there is functionality to customize what that road speed is at a given time. So it's possible.
Another question from Ronald: how does training whilst driving work in practice with Geotab?
How does training?
Yes, whilst driving. I think that you also mentioned during your presentation that through your technology, you can also steer and train the drivers on driver behavior while they are driving the vehicles. Is it that they will get messages, will alerts, etc., or how does it work?
Yes. So sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. So yes, there is a couple of ways in which that is possible. So one is you could send a notification to the driver in real time, whether that be through tablet, an iPhone. But there is also another way through what we call the GoTalk, which is an extension of our product, which essentially provides in-cab driver feedback in real time, right? So, if we can see that the driver is harsh accelerating, they can get a message in real time, say, hey, we've seen you do this, you need to make sure that you don't do it again. So that real-time training is possible.
Okay. Question from James Davis: can Geotab provide me the battery condition, the state of the battery at the time it will be sold again, it goes to the used car market?
Not on a individual case-by-case basis. And so what I mentioned at the top around battery degradation, so we have done some analysis on the battery state of health for over 6,300 vehicles which are on the Geotab fleet. You can break that down by model and OEM and the year. So if it's on that list, then yes, it's possible to drill down to that specific vehicle. But it's not something we provide on a vehicle by vehicle basis. But that research is available. If you just go on geotab.com, type in battery degradation, and you'll see some of the analysis that we have done around battery state of health.
Okay, good tip. Question from Charles Schott: based upon the data you have analyzed, is there a quantifiable difference in ELCV performance based on the environment, from hot, dry to cold, wet conditions?
So is this in relation to electric LEDs?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we have done, noted this is for all vehicle segments, but it will be related, is having a look at how the temperature impacts the vehicle battery and also the range of that battery. So again, we analyzed over 6,000 vehicles within the Geotab fleet to find, okay, when does the battery optimize? At what specific temperature is that, right? So we found that on average, operating at around 21 degrees Celsius, you will get the optimal range of that vehicle. If you were to sway below that, so below 21, that will have a negative impact. And if you were to operate above 21, that will also have a negative impact on the range. And again, we've done some analysis that's available publicly, again, geotab.com, and just type in EV temperature tool, and you will see some of the analysis that we've done for the vehicles that we have on fleet around how temperature specifically impacts the range of the vehicle batteries.
Good. In the same context, what is the impact of load on the autonomy of ELCVs?
Yes, we haven't done that analysis, so we don't know.
That's still on the to-do list.
Yes, it is on the to-do list. We know it's one of the growing number of factors that can impact the range of the vehicle. So it is on the to-do list, but yeah, we haven't done that analysis to date.
Okay. Final question. Are you working already with car manufacturers of electric vehicles that will have your solution of factory already in the vehicles, so that as a customer, a fleet manager, I can immediately access the solutions of Geotab because it's already manufacturer based?
Yes, we do. Simple answer there. So we currently work with a couple of OEMs where we connect directly to the embedded telematics device, which kind of removes the need to install any physical hardware into the vehicle. So you're getting data directly from the vehicle into the cloud platform, just to name a few. So we have relationships with Ford, Mercedes, and PSA, and this is growing in the number of OEMs that we are connecting with. But yes, we do have that, and as their strand of EVs come onto market, that connectivity services will be available with those electric vehicles.
Okay, Joshua Gordon, thank you very much. We need to end the Q&A here. Thank you very much for answering the questions, for giving the presentation. I think it has become clear that a connected fleet is the right fleet for the future, for sure also when it comes to LCVs. I don't know if this is going to work. Yes, so next on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, so we have now experienced our second webinar of this Fleet Week. So still to come, tomorrow we will have a learning webinar sponsored by LeasePlan on successfully migrating to an ELCV fleet. And then on Thursday, we will talk about TCO with fleet logistics. And we end this Fleet Week with maximizing LCV utilization through flexibility, sponsored by Sixt. So 3 new, engaging, informative, and interactive webinars for the rest of this Fleet Week. And I hope, of course, to meet with you also tomorrow. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.